feeling that everything in America is completely fucked up.
You know that feeling that the whole country is like 1 inch away from saying, that's it, forget it.
All right. So, here we go. Yesterday I was a little bit busy, and then Croco just kind of randomly was like, "Hey, if anybody wants to come on, you can come on." So, late last night I actually joined up with Croco's stream towards the end of it, cuz we still plan on doing our stream. He's just been kind of busy, which is understandable. Totally understandable. There's probably a lot going on in everybody's lives right now, to be honest. So tonight, I gotta give it a little bit of time. I actually removed some stuff from this stream just because I didn't want to give you. Maybe none of the details mattered to you, but I didn't want to give you details that didn't really matter. And then I didn't want to go so far that, I don't know, YouTube just removes it completely. So we'll do the best that we can. And it is very cold. Daniel said it was very cold. It is so cold. Arkansas is pretty cold right now, which is weird because, like, just the other day, I don't know, it hit like 70 or 80 something degrees. We're at the weird point in Arkansas where you're like having floods, droughts, tornadoes, and snow all at the same time. So it's really fun. Oh, so I've got a good bit to cover tonight. Now, some of you actually might already know what Red Summer is or what it stands for. We're going to go over a little bit of history with that, but what I would like to point out is a lot of people don't realize how long that we've actually had alphabet agencies in this country. The elite have been pulling the strings since it started, so there's some pretty familiar names that I might name out tonight. Stuff like that. So basically, the reason that I wanted to put this stream together is because super early morning news, I'm talking like 3-4 a.m. type news on CNN, they had mentioned that if anybody knows what Black Wall Street is, they had mentioned that they found hundreds more remains from Black Wall Street. And the way that CNN described the story very, very quickly just really pissed me off because a lot of people don't actually know what Black Wall Street is. Anyway, I don't think that they knew until there was some kind of movie or documentary about it. Basically, there's only ever been 2 times that the government has actually dropped bombs on U.S. citizens or people living in the U.S., and Black Wall Street was the last time that happened. They don't like to point that part out. No, it was just an angry white mob that decided themselves that they were going to go and destroy an entire community. Well, that's not exactly how it went down. There was a lot of propaganda leading up to that time point. I might need to pull something up on this. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that the FBI had actually existed since 1908, but it didn't become something official until, I think, 1918, maybe the 1920s. It had been around for a really long time, though. They just didn't have an official group or name before that happened, as well as stuff like the CIA. Now, I don't know the exact time frame on the CIA, but we've had groups or intelligent groups like this since before they had names, right? So it's even harder to be able to go and find the actual history on some of that stuff because it's very deeply buried, and they don't want to talk about how much propaganda they actually spread within our own countries. So tonight, I feel like this is so important to go over Red Summer because we're actually in the exact same scenario right now. Did you guys also know that during Red Summer, they were having race riots on top of a pandemic? Now, this time it's a bit different. We don't necessarily have the Spanish flu going on. We've got a little bit more of a scamdemic going on here. But either way, isn't it, I don't know, ironic, kind of? It's not funny because it was like, I don't know, a lot of movies want to make the the 1920s sort of era and a little bit before then just seem all fine and dandy. It was not fine and dandy. There was so much going on in that time period. There's several different topics that you could choose from to talk about. But again, even like today, it all plays together in how society is acting. And the propaganda machine that we have today is 1,000 times stronger than what it was back then. Because back then it was very word of mouth. You had to implement yourself into some sort of group. You would pay the newspaper off because that's kind of like what they had. You would get the newspaper. You could pay the newspaper off and plant a story in there to kind of get an uprising out of people. And today it's even easier because all you have to do is open your phone, right? And it gets you to feel some kind of way. Most of the time they want us to be angry and outraged. And in between, 30 minutes of anger and outrage, they might give you one cute cat video. You might see a silly monkey. That's kind of how the news happens today. Like I said, before I really get into some of this stuff, I just want to talk about it a little bit and maybe wait long enough for YouTube not to hide me. That would be cool. Yeah, Polygon, that's a good bit of information right there. Exactly. Banking and insurance industry was heavily involved in setting up the agencies. Insurance is important for war as they have all strategic locations. There you go. Daniel, I haven't watched Watchmen, but from what I know, that is how they've opened it up. I think I read that somewhere. You can let me know if it's worth watching or not. I figured it might not be because I don't know if they go over the true history of that kind of stuff. No matter what race you are coming to watch this, like, I really don't care. I just don't like people playing on your race to get an uprising out of you, right? In the past, yes. In the past, there were some pretty big issues. But the way that people are rioting and looting and protesting today, very little, I use protesting very lightly there. You have no idea. And if you're trying to get something out of what happened in the past, that's just going to lead us to history repeating itself. It's a very silly way to go. They use the same tactics back then as they are today. And I'm gonna really try to get into that. I'm sorry, I know I'm eating pudding again. Sometimes I just sit here too long, or I work doing something else for too long and I forget that I need to eat. So then whenever I've promised people on Twitter, like, hey, I'm gonna have a stream in an hour, then I better fucking do it, because I promised it. Steve says, what do you think's going to happen to Desiree Messenger, the girl talk, and right there, unless he gets in the past and I just seen you all day on Diamond Street, Heartwalk Street, Hook, another day, desire. I have no idea what you're talking about. What is... So, Steve, you think that you're being gang stalked? Hold on. What? What the fuck? I don't know if that's a song or not. Clarify that for me. Daniel or anybody in chat, if you could clarify what the fuck Steve is talking about, because I'm about to just get rid of him. Kind of blowing up the chat with shit that doesn't make sense isn't very cool. What the fuck is Desiree Messenger? Desiree? Like, if you're saying I stole a truck, that's fucking retarded, because I don't even have a truck. I'm looking for one. Wow. It is strange. I'll just try not to pay attention to that. I don't even know what's going on. If you do keep blowing up chat, though, I'll have to just get rid of you. Um, most of the chat just wants to talk to each other, talk about whatever we're going to talk about, and it looks like you're not talking about anything that I'm talking about. Some kind of trolling. I don't know. I've never gang stalked anybody. That's not a cool thing to do. Another thing about tonight's stream is I do have, I took like some snapshots of stuff that I wanted to read off to you because it's just so deep in Wikipedia or somewhere else that it just made it easier. So I'll have to see if I can remember to go back and forth between my articles and the picture bits that I need to read from. So just bear with me a little bit. I'm going to do the best I can with that, but I don't know how it'll work out. We'll just have to see. I think we've gone long enough into this. So, like I said, we have a mass grave discovered in search for 1921 Tulsa race massacre victims. So, if you don't know, that was known as Black Wall Street. There's no telling how many people actually died that night, both white and black, because this was a time period where I don't think I can be mad at this. This was a time period where black communities had decided that they needed to protect themselves and they weren't just going to keep getting ran over. So this is kind of what led up to that instance, supposedly how the story goes, right? There's also a lot of propaganda on both sides that kind of caused, in my opinion, Red Summer and the events that went through Red Summer, which is technically like 1918 to 1922. I think it puts it into a smaller time frame than that historically. But either way, you kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about here, I think. So a team of experts searching for victims of Oklahoma's 1921 Tulsa race massacre uncovered what it says is a mass grave on Wednesday, nearly 100 years after white mobs burned down a section of town known as Black Wall Street. Well, some of you might know or understand that it wasn't necessarily white mobs that decided to come in. It was sheriffs and government officials, and I've read an article and I've had evidence before where government officials from higher up even told them to make this happen, but basically the sheriffs were told to deputize citizens, which were already pissed off because of all of the propaganda that they've been reading in their newspapers and rumors from out of groups that were spreading around town. They were already mad enough at what was kind of going on in that time period, whether it be made up or not. Sheriffs were told to deputize citizens. They gave them guns, they gave them ammo, they told them to shoot on sight, right? And this actually went on for 2 or 3 days, I believe. And in the end of it, like, it was just getting so brutal and bad that they actually, some of the people that they had kind of deputized, I guess is the way to put it, they got their private planes, and I think that the government even supplied some planes, and they were basically dropping firebombs down onto this area known as Black Wall Street. And it's weird because this area already had enough of violence before this happened, and it's because a lot of the look, you might not like me saying this, but a lot of white people didn't like to see black people doing well during that time. But I feel like Black Wall Street is actually something that, you know, people of color and anyone else should look at and go, wow, that was really successful. And I think that the government did become very involved with this, because they didn't need that at that time. And then whenever J. Edgar Hoover came around and was more involved in this kind of stuff, he was basically shutting down any black group that he thought was too large. And we'll get into that because it has to do with Bolsheviks, it has to do with Zionism, it has to do with leftist tactics, all of these things reaching into the black communities. So this is where I say that you have propaganda from both sides. And if we understand how Zionists work, at least, or how the elite work in this instance, you can grasp the idea on how they would play both sides to cause this violence, right? It was to destroy the created generational wealth that they had achieved thus far. Black people have never recovered. I wouldn't say that they had never recovered. To be honest, I think that the society that we have today, it's not so much a problem with systematic racism or whatever you want to call it. It's the music and the kind of propaganda that they're fed. Basically, there's not a young black man out there that watches any kind of TV or hears in music how he can become successful by making his own business or something. They're all told that they have to play a sport or sell drugs. So when you put yourself in that mindset and lock yourself down in that mindset, you're going to stay there. The guys that end up being successful see past all the racism, they see past the stereotyping, they go out and get what they need, and do what they need to do, right? Without having to hurt anybody else, without doing whatever. It's silly basically telling your kid that the only way you're going to make it is with a scholarship. Because if you think about it, those scholarships aren't handed out left and right. Especially to actually make it to the NFL or the NBA, that's just going to be impossible. So what do you resort to after that? Well, all the TV shows and music tell you need to sell drugs. That's the cycle that we live in. Okay. Yeah, Carolyn, I can agree with that because it was going to create generational wealth. The part that I get stuck on is how the mainstream media and anybody that ever talks about this only wants to mention white mobs. They don't want to speak about, how that really started and what actually happened. So, and then check this out. I actually just found this today because I was thinking about the time period, and then I was able to find this headline. It says it was written after George Floyd. So, racial violence and a pandemic, how the Red Summer of 1919 relates to 2020. And like I said, Red Summer played out until after 1919, but the worst of it was during this time period. So basically they were going through a third wave. Is that what it said somewhere? So they were going through a third wave of the so-called Spanish flu pandemic that emerged the previous year. So it's so weird. Does this not feel like we're repeating history all over again, but on this amped up scale? Because whatever we're doing right now, it truly does feel like if it continues, we're going to get back to this mindset, this dangerous mindset from both sides, right? And things could even be reversed this time, which just doesn't make, how does that help anybody if we were to go that far in doing anything? Now, I did want to speak on this just because it's so crazy to even think about. I already mentioned Black Wall Street and what happened, but it did happen in 1921. The bombing of Black Wall Street has a Delaware connection. So let's see. Where was it? Give me a second, guys. Just I can't find the bit that I wanted to read, but this is how supposedly it had started. Supposedly, like many other cases that were out there. And again, the media played a big part in everything that happened. Every big event that you could think of that happened during this time period, during Red Summer, the media played a role in it. So that May, a young white woman named Sarah Page accused Dick Rowland, a black shoe shiner, of raping her in an elevator. So there were several different reports on this. He grabbed her by the arm. He tripped, all kinds of things, but then it just came out like, oh, he raped her. Despite the complete absence of evidence that she had been attacked, Oklahoma newspapers, Oklahoma newspapers carried an inflammatory headline like Lynch N-word, don't get mad at me, but Lynch Negro Night. That's literally what they put in the newspaper. Now, if I go back to talking about some of these alphabet agencies and governments being involved in things, the government actually did, I don't know about in this instance, but there were a few times when things kind of like this happened that the government came in and gave the media a specific headline. Now think about this. This is before the time period, I believe, of like Project Mockingbird. You know, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Mockingbird came a little bit later. So, you know, they were already working on these tactics before that even happened. It's kind of crazy to think about. Now, to give you a little bit of an idea, if you've never heard of Red Summer, the race riots, any of that, I'll read a little bit about it. Let me go make sure that I'm not missing any of my, hold on, that I'm not missing any of this stuff. What's this? I might be missing out on this. Let me read this really quick, because I might need to. Give me just a second, guys. I have to pull it up on my screen, too. So during the Chicago racial violence against blacks, the press learned from the Department of Justice officials that IWW, which I believe IWW is a, what do you call it? The groups of workers. It always fails. Get past that. And Bolsheviks were spreading propaganda to breed race hatred. FBI agents filed reports that leftist views were winning coverts in the black community. One cited the work of the NAACP urging the colored people to insist upon equality with white people and to resort to force if necessary. J. Edgar Hoover, at the start of his career in government, analyzed the riots for the Attorney General. He blamed the July Washington, D.C. riots on numerous assaults committed by Negroes upon white women. For the October events in Arkansas, we'll actually go over some stuff in Arkansas because it plays a huge role. And I know some of the history that's not talked about from here, but this is going to make you kind of have an aha moment and maybe lead you to look into something else. He blamed certain local agitation in a Negro lodge. A more general cause, he cited, was propaganda of radical nature, which the FBI is pretty good at doing themselves, are they not? He charged that socialists were feeding propaganda to black-owned magazines such as The Messenger, which in turn aroused their black readers. He did not note the white perpetrators of violence whose activities local authorities documented. As chief of the radical division within the U.S. Department of Justice, Hoover began an investigation of Negro activities and targeted Marcus Gravery because he thought his newspaper preached Bolshevism, which it kind of did. So during this time, because of all the events that were going on, and we had just gotten out of the war and all this different kind of stuff, Hoover and the FBI were extremely focused on... Hold on. They were extremely focused on actually getting... I'm going to remove this so I don't accidentally open it again. They were really needing to basically stop any kind of uprising. If they saw anything that could overthrow the government at all, they had to put a stop to it. So... is it true? Is it not? Were they putting people in weird positions on purpose? I would say probably so, because there's other articles that you could find where they snuck people into different black communities or lodges and things like that. And the FBI had guys on the inside. Believe it or not, there might not be great history of that, but they were a pretty diverse group of people over there at the FBI and who they had to do work for them. But they were extremely involved, in my opinion, in the kinds of things that were going on here because they were a part of every single investigation. They had guys sent in before there was an investigation. So if you think about it, we're kind of dealing with the same thing that we did today. And the government, I believe, has a huge part in actually playing a role in everything that went down. If you think about it, no one is truly born with any kind of hatred. Like, we can see our differences. We can see that people are different, right? But there are some people that like power, right? It's not even so much that they really hate a different group. They love power so much that they'll convince a group to do something for them to get what they want in return. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm not going to stick on the race riots too much. Let me make sure that I don't have something for... Okay, so racial tensions across the U.S. were exacerbated by the discharge of millions of military personnel. So this included a lot of young black men back to their homes and domestic lives following the end of the war. Competition for opportunities in post-war America combined with a radically changed social landscape placed whites and blacks in conflict with one another, leading to tragic results. So we're in this third wave of a pandemic that's going on. You've got the government very involved. You've got the media very involved in hyping up people. We're in a recession at this point. There's lots of competitions for jobs. There's lots of competition for housing. There's competition for everything. So any way that somebody could be divided with someone else was being amplified 10 times over by the government and media, right? It was not a time period that you necessarily wanted to be in. It was pretty bad. I might even have something that I wanted to read to you on that. I'm not sure if I should have saved this for later, but I'll open it up. Great Migration. Is that this? All right. So with the mobilization of troops for World War I and with immigration from Europe cut off, the industrial cities of the American Northeast and Midwest experienced severe labor shortages. Wow, another similarity as to what's going on today. As a result, northern manufacturers recruited throughout the South, from which an exodus of workers ensued. By 1919, an estimated 500,000 African Americans had immigrated from the southern United States to the industrial cities of the Northeast and Midwest in the first wave of the Great Migration. Let's see. African American workers filled new positions in expanding industries such as the railroads, as well as many existing jobs formerly held by whites. In some cities, they were hired as strike breakers. We're going to get into this later again. Especially during the strikes of 1917, this increased resentment against blacks among many working-class whites, immigrants, and first-generation Americans. Now, this happened, though, the same thing would happen today, because, let me make sure I'm getting rid of the right thing. The same thing could potentially happen today, and I've actually seen it with some of the farmers and stuff that I've talked to or know about. So it's really hard to find good white workers. Now, I'm not throwing white people under the bus, but let me say this. If you need a job, you need a job, right? I'm sorry that somebody doesn't want to pay you more, but guess what? If you're not willing to take that job, possibly the only job that's around you for miles, someone else will take it for a lower price because they need the work. That pisses people off even today. I've heard from a couple of farmers that, they'll hire anybody. The problem is some people think that they're too good for the work. And guess what? If you have to resort to scooping up chicken shit, and that's your job, is to scoop up chicken shit, I can guarantee that you're not going to be getting paid 15 to 20 bucks an hour, especially in the South. It's not going to happen. If you need a job, you need a job. Most people would just rather, believe it or not, there are white people out there that would rather take the government assistance. So this isn't just, I don't really see anymore that we have a colored issue of any kind. It's just we have a lazy mentality within the people today, right? Like back then, they wanted to be paid more. They didn't like how something was going. They went on strike and someone would come in and do the job for a cheaper price. You know, some black man out there was just happy to have a job. Yeah, it's not clean and innocent. Nobody's ever claimed that, but it is important to remember this history without getting pissed off at it, right? Like, cuz times are much different today. You're not dealing with the same things today, and it just pisses me off to see people in the streets acting as if it were. It's not anywhere near the same. There's there's millions of opportunities out there. People just don't know how and when to grab at those opportunities. And when they fail at something, they want to go, "Oh, it's because I'm this," or "Oh, it's because I'm that." No, it's not. It's because you didn't try hard enough. Hey, McChillin, I'm going over stuff that most people probably wouldn't care to hear about because it's Black history, but it's Black history from Fringe. And how alphabet agencies were involved, lots of propaganda, Zionist, and how it compares to today. It's just like today, basically. Let me get off of... Wait, my computer's kind of stuck. Give me a second. Do I need to, like, click on this? What's the deal? Shit, guys, my computer's stuck. Hold on. Hold on. It's so stuck. If you want, you could go check out Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Exchange. All right, here we go. So this was like the second. It's not so much that I know a shit ton about the Elaine massacre, but I've already told you guys the time period that we're in, right? So kind of like 1918 through 1922. I have told you about the fact that our government was very involved. The media was very involved in pushing this sort of stuff. Daniel should be a mod. Let's like... Can I do that from here? No, I can't yet. Daniel, I'm going to make you a mod sometime before this stream is up. But I want to go over this because there's actually a lot of history that revolves around Arkansas and this time period. And it's not so much the racial history that I want to get into. I want to let you know some of the characters that were here, what was going on during that time period, and how much influence this state actually has on the country, believe it or not, even today. I don't know how many of you guys know this, but Arkansas and southern Missouri area, the elite love it. And I'll get into like why the elite... I'm not going to go too deep. I don't want to get Arkansided, but you know, because most of you just know about the Clintons. I'm talking about shit that happened way before the Clintons were ever even a thought in somebody's head. So the Elaine massacre, I'm not going to go over this, but there were, you know, the Ku Klux Klan, everybody always brings that up if you say the South, especially Arkansas. And I would like to say that I think most of us know that government agencies are most likely what created this. It did come from, you know, Democrats. I'm not going to get all into that left-right bullshit. I just want to say that we know that governments were heavily involved in the KKK. I do believe the FBI and many of the elite, even though they didn't believe in it, they had a lot to do with certain funding and getting in the ears of people to it. So this was possibly the bloodiest racial conflict in the history of the United States. This was pretty big, and I just kind of wanted to bring this up because it kind of was the same, not the same, but it was pretty bad. You know, Black Wall Street was really bad, but this is a whole nother kind of thing on how it was done. And the newspapers, again, had a ton to do with why this happened. But if I could go over a little bit of info with you, I'm sure that many of us are aware of the names Rothschilds and Rockefellers, right? Now, from what I know, I don't think that any of the Rothschilds are still here. If they are, their land is being held in other names. That's a possibility. But, and I don't know as much of the history of Rothschilds being in Arkansas as I do Rockefellers. So I'll kind of give you the tidbit that I know, and I think that you can go and verify all of this information if you wanted to. But the Rockefellers' involvement is in Arkansas, is kind of a big part of, those were the first two big elite names that you still know today that had heavy involvement in this area. So we know that the Rockefellers are really good with their long-term planning, and they brought you the education system that we have today. All of that was developed here in Arkansas. The beginning of all of that planning was here. So another key thing that I want to point on, and this all ties together. I should have pulled this up. I'm kind of just going off my head here. So if I get something wrong, you can tell me, but I doubt it because I kind of know, I know some history that's not even written about, just to throw it out there, and not like stuff that I could actually verify from people that have lived here for a long time and stories that have been passed down and things. But Freemasonry. I'm not going to go super deep into this, but I know that a lot of you know that there can be some power in Freemasonry. And I would say it's super diluted today. Like, most of the people that are a Freemason, they're pay to play. You're not, like, you are a Mason, but you're not really a Mason, right? If you just came in and you're paying to play, I don't think that you're on the same level as the people that are truly a part of this stuff. So to branch out onto that, most of the leaders and founders and beginning government workers kind of Arkansas for a very, very long time, they were Freemasons. And the Masonry Lodge here that was built, the Grand Lodge that was built here, their whole thing was kind of on how to control education and government. And that was kind of like their main focus, and it was an extremely exclusive group here for some reason. And I think that they've been suspended and sued. Like, this was like Scottish Rite shit. Like, it's the dirty stuff. Some of you might understand if you've ever looked into it, the Satanic Panic sort of time period, the occult histories, things like that. Arkansas plays a heavy role in all of this, and I'm not going to go super deep into like everything that I know about that, but let me just say that there's still some places here today that you don't need to travel to. There's some really fucked up people that were taught some really fucked up things, and you don't want to go there. Just black magic, voodoo, satanic shit, different cults. It's all here. So like I said, it's extremely exclusive, and many of you guys know about Albert Pike. Well, he was the chairman of this lodge, and supposedly, I'm hitting on this because I think it's just rumored, I don't know if it was ever truly fact, but supposedly he was a KKK member, and what I find most interesting about that is he and Rockefeller actually hung out often. Him and Rockefeller were really good buddies. I don't know if there's a whole lot of history on that either, but Rockefeller did give that Grand Masonic Lodge here and Albert Pike a shit ton of money. Like, a ton of money came directly from the Rockefellers, and so they still own a good portion of land here today. Most of it's been moved around into other company names and things like that, but there's plenty of elite that still own a ton of land up here. And Arkansas is a weird place because most of you just think of it as this little podunk whatever sort of town, but there's a lot of people that come out of here that have very specific bloodlines. They're very close to elite families, and maybe now you'll see to understand why, and it's because of who lived here in the past and how they built this state up. This state was built basically on some of the darkest stuff, and the most elite people coming here to have very exclusive meetings with each other that not many people get to know about, and I'm not so sure if it's truly written about in history. Now, why they chose that, or this place, I'm not positive. It's a pretty good central hub as to where you are in the country, but on top of that, where Arkansas is located, to some people it has a whole lot of meaning on where it is, not just on the map, but on a global scale. There's like some weird hoodoo, juju type stuff with like where we're located. So I don't know. There's a lot of fucked up history here, and I'm just gonna stop talking because, like I said, I don't want to get Arkancited. I know a whole lot of stuff. Um, it's not necessarily stuff that you'll find in the history books. Um, it's not stuff that a whole lot of Arkansans would know. I just happen to know some things. Also, during this time period, just to bring it up, because they talk about anarchists a lot in the media today as well. 1919 United States anarchist bombings. So there were a lot that happened during this time period. In late April 1919, at least 36 booby-trapped, dynamite-filled bombs were mailed to cross-section of prominent politicians and appointees, including the Attorney General, as well as justice officials. So, was this legitimate anger, or is it more propaganda? I'm not positive. They were also sent to newspaper editors and businessmen, including, guess who, Mr. John D. Rockefeller. Among all the bombs addressed to high-level officials, one bomb was addressed to the home of the Department of Justice Bureau of Investigation. Let's see here. Yeah, they turned into the FBI. So, field agents, once tasked with investigating the different stuff, they also had stuff sent to them. I just wanted to bring this up because things are really heating up here in the United States. And it just feels like all the same stuff is going around once again. And it all comes back to that Bolshevik mentality. It all comes back to the Zionist playing a role in this kind of stuff. I would compare what happened during Red Summer even to that of, it's on a whole nother level. It's the ideology that's coming from this. Hear me on that. I think that some of the people here know that what happened during the Holocaust is not exactly how they tell you in school. There's a reason they don't teach you that history. They don't want to tell you that a certain kind of Jew out there went out and did some really fucked up shit to others. And because Bolsheviks and Jewish leaders were so a part of what happened during the Red Summer, I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think that the same mentality was used so we could have that. You can't say anything bad about Jews today, and there's a reason for that. They can put it all in your face. They can tell you everything about how they run all the banks and they're super smart and how they rule the world. But if I say that, it's bad. Do you understand where I'm going with that? Thanks, guys. And so I think that the same thing actually happened during Red Summer. I think a lot of propaganda came about. I think the ideology that was being used there for future events is why that whole narrative happened. Yes, people did bad things, but people were pushed to do bad things. Does that make sense to anybody? Ugh. So I wanted to speak on this because I think that we're going to be going through some kind of recession or depression too. And while everybody's freaked out about a fake scamdemic, again, it's just Red Summer literally happening all over again right in front of your eyes. The stream is not going as well as I thought it would. My brain was way more on point, I think, before I came on. But it's just hard to decide, what can you say on YouTube? What can you not say? I don't know, Oh my god, you're gonna burn in hell, Fringe. I haven't laughed this hard all day. Well, I'm glad you're laughing. I don't know if it's so funny though. It's fucked up how we can continue to use the same tactics over and over and over again, is it not? And that's exactly why history repeats itself, is because nobody wants to pay attention to what happened during that time period, and no one wants to admit that your government was extremely involved in it. Just as they are today, but like I said, you don't have to read it from your newspaper. You can just open up your cell phone and kind of get a feeling of what's going on by being on Facebook for 5 minutes or something, or Twitter, whatever it is. So the post-World War I recession was an economic recession that hit much of the world in the aftermath of World War I. In many nations, especially in North America, economic growth continued and even accelerated during World War I as nations mobilized their economies to fight the war in Europe. After the war ended, the global economy began to decline because war is good for the pockets. It's great for earning money. I think Rockefeller actually said something about when there's blood running in the streets, that's the time to make the most money or so. There's a quote on that if anybody wants to go find it. Rockefellers are some fucked up people. So between 1918 and 1919 saw the modest economic retreat, but the second part of 1919 saw a mild recovery. A more severe recession hit the United States in 1920 and 1921 when the global economy fell very sharply. So I think most of us would link that to the Great Depression, and you understand that. I'm just seeing a lot of the same stuff. We have a whole lot of people that are out of work. Our economy looks okay, but that's because it's being propped up with infinity funny money, you know, prints to infinity and beyond. There's already racial tensions brewing, and the government is playing both sides of that. I can guarantee you that alphabet agencies are playing both sides of that. That's, like, I don't know, for somebody like me, that's not hard to think that there's groups and different operations and AI playing a role in all of this. So I just expect whatever's going to come to be amplified 10 times over. And I don't think that it'll necessarily be a race war this time. I think it'll just be, well, that sounds very Alex Jonesy, but it's like a war on the mind. So basically, if you think this way, then, you know, we're against you. And if you think that way, then we're against you. And eventually it just comes to this boiling point where we all fight about it. And it's not going to end very well. So the strike breakers is actually what caused a lot of Red Summer as well. Because like I said earlier, whenever there's somebody that thinks that they're too good to do the work, or they're not happy with their union, or whatever it is, somebody else will come in and do that work because they really need it. And they're willing to be paid, you know, a lot less than you. So that makes sense. And we still deal with that today. There's a lot of people, a lot of millennials, a lot of folks out there that just think that they're too good for any job ever, right? And to come back onto it, I know that this has been such a scattered stream. It's so much worse than what I thought that I could do. Let me see where this like keeps wanting to go all the way to the bottom. That's really gay. All right. So just so YouTube knows, and I'm not, you know, just being anti-Semitic or something. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Yeah. Was the Russian Revolution Jewish? 100 years after the Bolsheviks swept to power, historians and contemporaries still struggle to understand the prominent role played by Jews. Yeah, they had a pretty prominent role. They had a really prominent role in Red Summer as well. So some observers saw Lenin and his band of a motley group of Jewish revolutionaries, Alexander Gochkev, the Russian Minister of War in the Russian Provisional Government after Tsar Nicholas II abdicated in March 1917, told the British military attaché General Alfred Knox that the extreme element consists of Jews and imbeciles. Lenin's train had included 19 members of his Bolshevik party, several of his allies among the Mensheviks, and 6 Jewish members of the Jewish Labor Bund. Almost half the passengers on the train were Jewish. So this mentality of Bolshevism, Bolsheviks, however you want to say it, came over to the U.S., right? They came over here. Did I have anything else that I needed to read from this? In a second, I'll read from this. But basically, they came over here, and they started spreading the same sort of mentality into black communities. They got some white people on board, and in most of these places, you actually had a white man that came in and handed out, should we say a white man or a Jewish man? A Zionist came in and handed out some books. He handed out some paperwork that kind of spread this Bolsheviks mentality over to the people. And this really did scare J. Edgar Hoover. It scared the FBI. And I think that they made it more something out of nothing than it was. But it did fear them. They didn't want people to have too much power. They were very against communist and socialist type things, which makes sense. But basically, they could go in and call any black group, socialist or communist, and be able to do something about it. But there were many newspapers that kind of sold just to black communities, and they kind of had this ideology in their books or in their newspapers. I don't have much more, McChillin. Good night. I'll be done here pretty soon anyway. So that got spread over here. I really wanted to highlight on that at the end of the stream. And maybe YouTube won't be a bitch about it. We'll see. Like I said, this stream didn't flow as nicely as I thought it would. It's just difficult to go back and forth between some of the screenshots that I had and taking out certain articles I don't think really helped me here. I probably should have just sacrificed keeping them in. But we see the same thing happening today. Zionists still control a lot of the people. We're still on their narrative, right? And it's very interesting to think that even during the Red Summer, white Jewish men, not just white men, but white Jewish men, actually kind of controlled this narrative and controlled the mentality of these black communities. Now, I want to compare that today to Antifa and Black Lives Matter, because who do you think is funding them? Take a wild guess. Who do you think is funding Black Lives Matter and Antifa? So again, it's like these people haven't even gotten themselves out of that cycle. They think that they are being independent in their thinking, when in reality it's being fed to you, right? Yes, a hallmark of the Rothschilds is changing names, exactly, and countries. They do it often and regularly. A good many are documented, but that means a lot more aren't known. Exactly, Daniel. I actually think that that's why it's so important for it's just a tiny portion of it, but for the companies like 23andMe, where you send in your DNA, I think that the bloodline has been so polluted and lost that they are looking for anybody that might have a bit of that bloodline left in them, or a strong portion of that bloodline left in them. Because you're right, these families have kind of fucked people over so often that they do have to change their names or move somewhere else. And throughout time, that gets a little bit scattered. You kind of forget to put some names down on the family tree, right? Let's see. What was this? I have some other stuff, apparently, and I'm not even sure what it is. Haynes report. Something on Zionist Bolsheviks. Let's see here. Why is that like that? I don't like that. This was working fine earlier today. Oh, well, this was partly why J. Edgar Hoover and our government was so concerned about this, because the Bolsheviks actually did overthrow the Russian government and got their way. So there's that. Chicago violence. That had something to do with comparing Antifa and Black Lives Matter, but I think that I did that for you. I think that was another version of it. Yeah, so basically everything that happened back then, it was hyped up. It was really hyped up with the media and people not really thinking for themselves, and I think that we will end up seeing the same thing happen again. Hopefully it's not just a race war. I think that it's going to be, again, a war on kind of how you think or where you stand, and it's not going to end up pretty for any of the groups that are out there, because someone's going to end up they're going to keep getting richer off of the moves that we make, right? We're going to continue to have a more militarized police force because of the moves that people make. Like, they're being fed this propaganda, but they can't see that it's propaganda. They think that they're being revolutionist, when in reality, we really are repeating this history all over again. I hope that you didn't find the stream too gay. Like I said, I took out some of the stuff that I had in there. Didn't seem to be super YouTube friendly, and people get extremely bored with history. That's totally understandable if you get bored with history. I can't help it. I just think that we need to recognize that we're in the exact same place. Recessions, tons of people without a job, there's already people angry in the streets, right? There is racial division that's being pushed on you from the media. It's not something organic. You know, young kids and people with low IQs get involved in that kind of stuff. That's just how that works. So, there you go. And maybe you learned some history on Arkansas. This is this place has a lot of history. That's all I have. I took out all the really good juicy stuff. Some of the sources just weren't great. So I have to use super reliable sources for YouTube not to get pissed off. SW, exactly. There's nothing new under the sun. Is that not sad how they can continue to use the same exact tactics over and over and over again, and it works every fucking time? I'm so done with it. Justin, that's a bit of interesting information. The 19th tarot card is the Sun, aka Corona. I don't know what's next. What's next for me is I'm just gonna sit up here in my cabin. That's what's next for me. I don't really care to be involved in anything anymore. People's minds are just... they're gone. They're gone. Like, whatever form of propaganda they're listening to, it's just too much for me to be able to handle. History does rhyme. Except for this time, we don't have a real pandemic. We've just got a scamdemic. But it's all the same as Red Summer. It's crazy. For some reason the other night, I'm not sure why my partner put on CNN. I think he just likes to be really mean to the ladies that are on TV there. But man, they pissed me off when they kind of half-told truths as far as Black Wall Street. And then whenever I started thinking about that, I started thinking about that time period a bit more, and it all really started to click. It really just started to click. What's next in the world, since you're stating it's repeating itself? Well, it's repeating itself right now. Red Summer was race riots. And right now you wouldn't necessarily call it a race riot, but you see that the Proud Boys are out there, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, different militias. They're all getting caught up in this stuff, and we have had a few people hurt. Well, also during those race riots back in the 1920s and a little bit before then, we were also going through a recession. We're going through a recession, if not a depression, right now, because we have so many people out of a job. There is competition for housing, there's competition for jobs. That's going to end up pissing people off even more, and it could get worse. Hopefully it gets better. We're going through this election selection thing right now, which I think just puts the cherry on top of people's mentality on where they are. So from here, honestly, I think I just see things continuing to get a tad bit more violent. Hopefully through the winter, not so much, because nobody wants to go out and protest and riot while they're freezing their balls off like that, or freezing their ass off. We'll just say ass so everybody can agree. So you don't really want to go protest and riot while you're freezing your ass off. Hopefully most of that resides over, but honestly, Red Summer actually started, I think, during late winter. So I think it actually started during the winter. So maybe, tensions could boil up if we see another Black person die due to police brutality. And I'm putting quotes here because some of those events might have been false flags. They might have been. So if we have that anger boiling up, but it's kind of too cold to go and do anything about it, it's still going to be fresh on people's minds as we get into those summer months. By then, we're going to have another president, or maybe the same guy. I'm not really sure. But it feels like tensions are just going to keep getting tighter and tighter. And that's exactly what happened during Red Summer. If you wanted to look into that more, there's a lot more info and a ton more detail out there with you. Just be careful about how you read it. because a lot of that is propaganda as well. They don't tell you that the government was super involved, or, you know, the Mockingbird media. So that's it, guys. Sorry if you found that boring. It's just something that's kind of been eating at my head for a while, and I want you guys to be careful and aware of the things that you're hearing. All right, so I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
I learned a lot. And I learned that, I learned a lot. Anyway, Bo is associated here. Anyway, the point I want to make is, I learned so much. I learned so much. I learned black, white, all colors, all backgrounds, but I mean, come on, man. Men, women, gay, straight, everyone deserves a shot, you know. Come on, man. You know the thing. You know what I mean? You know the thing. You know what I mean? Come on, man. What I have to do is I have to continue talking about the things that come on, man. I came down here because I remember the first bumper sticker I saw. I learned that I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. And I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I love kids jumping on my lap. Oh, I'm in trouble. What are we, nuts? Dead. You know. Come on, man. Give me a little break here. Get a life. Thank you, Coach.